The story of Saint Simon and Saint Jude.
Subscribe to our channel to receive more content like this.
In a time long ago, when the world was filled with dusty roads and people were just beginning to learn of a man named Jesus, there were two men, two apostles, who walked alongside him. Their names were Simon and Jude. Though they might not be as famous as Peter or John, their story is one of great importance. Simon, who is sometimes called the Zealot, was a man with a fiery passion. A zealot wasn't just someone with strong beliefs. It was a person who wanted to bring about change, sometimes by force. Simon wanted to see Israel freed from Roman rule, and he believed that God's kingdom should come swiftly, even if that meant fighting for it. He was driven by the belief that something had to be done to fix the broken world around him. Jude, on the other hand, was often referred to as Thaddeus or Lebbaeus, but most importantly, he was one of the 12 who followed Jesus. He was quieter, perhaps even a little more reserved, but his heart was just as full of devotion. While the world around him was chaotic and full of uncertainty, Jude believed that Jesus was the way to peace, to forgiveness, and to love. Both men were ordinary in many ways, but what made them extraordinary was their decision to leave behind everything and follow Jesus. When Jesus walked along the shore of the Sea of Galilee, calling his disciples to leave behind their old lives and follow him, Simon and Jude didn't hesitate. They heard the call. They chose to follow, not out of fame, not out of riches, but because they believed in the truth that Jesus brought. The road wasn't easy for Simon and Jude. They didn't know exactly what would happen next. They didn't know that they would be sent to faraway places or that they would encounter danger. All they knew was that they had been chosen by Jesus for a purpose, and that was enough. In fact, it was Jesus himself who gave Simon and Jude the mission to spread his message to the world. This wasn't just about telling stories or giving speeches. It was about being living examples of love, compassion, and forgiveness. They were to heal the sick, comfort the brokenhearted, and share the good news of God's kingdom. But there were challenges ahead. People didn't always understand the message. The world was full of confusion and pain. But Simon and Jude kept moving forward, their hearts set on the truth they had found in Jesus. They were bold, speaking the message of hope no matter where they went. Though Simon and Jude's names may not be shouted from the rooftops like some of the other apostles, their impact was far-reaching. They traveled together to distant lands, Simon to places like Egypt, and Jude to the far corners of Persia. In every village and town they visited, they spread the message of Jesus. People listened. Some believed. Others rejected them. But the apostles never stopped. One of the most powerful moments in their journey was when they stood in front of crowds of people who had never heard of Jesus. They didn't speak to be praised. They didn't seek fame or fortune. They spoke to share the truth of God's love for all people. In fact, it was their acts of kindness, their compassion, and their deep belief in the power of God's love that began to change lives. They didn't need to convince people with fancy words. They lived out the message every day. Eventually, their journey came to an end, but their legacy lived on. Both Simon and Jude suffered for the faith they had given their lives to. But even in death, their mission did not end. Their story, like so many others, is a reminder that the message of Jesus is not just for a few, it's for all. So what can we learn from Simon and Jude's story? First, that no matter where you come from, no matter what your past is, God can call you to something greater. They weren't perfect men, but they were willing to follow, willing to sacrifice, and willing to love. Second, their lives remind us that it's not about fame or recognition. It's about serving others, showing love, and living a life of purpose. The greatest impact we can make doesn't always come from doing grand things. Sometimes it comes from simply living out the truth we believe, one small action at a time. And finally, the story of Simon and Jude is a reminder that no matter how hard the journey gets, we are never alone. With faith and with each other, we can carry on the message of love, hope, and forgiveness. So, let us remember Simon and Jude, not just as distant figures from history, but as two men who walked in the footsteps of Jesus, sharing a message that is still relevant today, a message of love, compassion, and grace.